My next guest was voted one of the most influential people in the world. He's also one of CNN's top 10 heroes. He saw a need in the world and decided to make a difference. Magnus, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so I love how this story starts. You and your brother are hanging out at a pub, and you see something on the news that really motivates you to do something. Tell me about this.
That's right. It was back in the early 90s. The terrible war was going on in Bosnia. And over this pint of beer one night, we just started saying to each other, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could even do one small thing to help those people who are suffering? And before we really thought about it or had any proper plan, we began asking friends and family if they would donate food and clothing and just the basics that people needed. And we drove that to Bosnia. I always say that was the first miracle in the story. It was the first time my brother and I ever hatched a plan in a pub that actually happened. So that was amazing enough. And then the work just grew in these amazing ways from there.
But you and your brother thought, okay, we drove it to the border, we've done our duty, we've moved on. But people kept giving.
Exactly, and that's why I kept going with this. I expected just to go back to my work. I was a fish farmer, a salmon farmer, and came home to find this mountain of gifts. And I just said to God at that point, I'll keep going as long as there's a need and as long as people keep giving. And here I am 25 years later.
So you named the organization the Scottish International Relief and continued and started to expand and help other countries.
Yeah, we began working in lots of different countries. For example, in Romania, opening homes for children who were abandoned and HIV positive there, and Latin America, working with street children, West Africa during the war in Liberia, doing primary health care projects, all kinds of things, but no real theme until this work of Mary's Meals was born.
So how does, two guys who, again, as you said, fish farmers, how do you start an organization like this? I mean, people are going to be watching saying, how did this all happen, though?
Well, I mean, first of all, I have no qualifications to do this work whatsoever. And thinking back on it now over the years, I think more than anything how gentle God is, leading me one step at a time and very much learning along the way. And from the beginning, completely dependent on other people and their gifts and their knowledge of organisational development or finance or whatever it might be. God's just always sent the right people at the right time as this organisation has grown around the world. So sometimes I just feel like I'm sitting watching this amazing thing unfold every day.
You talk about God a lot in the process. Tell me about your relationship with God and how that started and how that motivated you in being able to do this work.
Yeah, well, I'm a Christian. That's why I wanted to do this work. I suppose it's why my brother and I were motivated to try and do something small to help. But certainly I would say my experience these years doing this work has just strengthened my faith over and over again. Just seeing God's providence at work over and over again when we've needed something to allow us to keep feeding the children. God has always provided. And I see that so often in the form of how he moves people in lots of different situations, lots of different parts of the world. He's moving people to get involved in this mission. So my faith has been deepened in lots of ways. Also very often learning and being evangelized by people who we think we're bringing gifts to, people who are the poorest of the poor, who might have nothing materially, but who have very often this incredible faith, this incredible trust in God.
And what is that like when you look in the eye of people who are in need, like in the Bosnian conflict and the other countries that you were able to help in those early days, knowing that, again, it started at such a humble beginning, but you were making such a huge difference?
Yeah, well, even from the very beginning, when I began making friends with people in those refugee camps in those days, I learned very quickly that many of those people who were in desperate need were people who had a much better education than I had, people who had a much richer experience of life than I had. It just so happened at that moment in time they were desperately in need of help. And it really led me down a path of starting to think deeply about the danger of doing this work sometimes as well, if it ever leads us to think because we are giving, we are superior in some way. So for us, this work, all these years since, we always tried to stay rooted in a real deep respect of each other, walking with each other when we're working with the world's poorest communities. It's not about us charging in and solving all their problems. It's about us walking with them, trying to solve those things together.
Truly being a neighbor, loving their neighbor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So one day you meet a woman named Emma in Malawi. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, so that was 2002, a year of terrible famine in Malawi, and I went to visit this family, and the father of the family had died just before that, and Emma, the mother of this family, was now dying herself, and she had her 6 children with her, and she said to me, you know, there's nothing left for me now except to pray that someone will look after my children. And then I began talking to her oldest child sitting beside her, and he was called Edward, and he was 14 years of age. And at one point in the conversation, I said to Edward, what are your hopes? What are your ambitions? And he looked at me and he said, I'd like to have enough food to eat, and I would like to be able to go to school one day. And that was it. That was the extent of his ambition at 14 years of age. And those words and the experience I'd had in the years before that of very often meeting children out of school because of hunger, children who were working or begging, just doing whatever they need to do to put the next meal on the table, and therefore missing out on their possibility of education, missing out on their only possible escape from poverty. So those experiences and the words of Edward in particular that day really led to the birth of this simple work that we do.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to hear about this simple work that is changing millions of children's lives every single day. Stay with us.